survival strategy for me as a faculty member. So I had this great project in place, and I was working with other faculty, but we wanted to figure out a way for students to be involved in it, right? And so through the Education Emergencies class, we divided, again, a very large class into policy teams, or what we call program teams. And so we had 3 countries, Kenya, Lebanon, and Ecuador, for that project. And each country had 2 teams that were working on it, doing a mapping, what programs are already being implemented in Ecuador around refugee education, what policies are in place around refugee education. And so again, lots of great work, intense work, but around, kind of bounded within a particular country, and then a lot of what I call cross-fertilization across these different groups. So those are just 2 examples of how I've done it in education and emergencies. And then I've taught another course called Curriculum and Pedagogy in International Contexts. And I just taught this once, about a year ago, and honestly wasn't sure how to do it in a meaningful way. And sent out an email to a number of NGOs and other partners that I work with to say, I'm teaching a class on curriculum. We have 3.5 months of students looking for a real-life experience. Do you have any projects that we could help you with? And I got an overwhelming response. You can see some of the examples here: the Norwegian Refugee Council, the International I can't even say these. Norwegian Refugee Council, the International Rescue Committee, JSOR, which is a smaller NGO in Lebanon, accommodating and working with Syrian refugees, Education Development, Sanctuary for Families, the INEE that I was just the group that I was just talking about, and another small community-based organization in Nepal. And all of these NGO partners said, we either have a project that we need to move forward in some way. So for example, NRC, they had come up with an interesting school readiness project for refugees to go back into the formal system. But it was contextualized for Lebanon. And they wanted to decontextualize it for the global level, so then other countries could then pick it up and recontextualize it, if that makes sense. And so that was an interesting process. So there were materials developed, but they needed to kind of be adapted and readapted. And so each actor, each partner had a different need. Some of them needed, from scratch, from zero, to write the curriculum. JSOR, for example, wanted a specific literacy curriculum or a specific science curriculum. And so the students worked with these partners, they had conversations with these partners, we had agreements in advance about what the work would be that the students would carry out. And these were just some of those examples from the curriculum class. And so just a couple reflections here before I turn things over. Certainly there are challenges to trying to manage these types of collaborative projects. For students, it's very different. They're not just going to come in and read and take a test or write a paper. There's so much more that is expected of them. So being really clear up front so they know that it's a good fit for them or not. If they're really committed to work or other things happening outside of school, maybe that's not the right semester for them to take that particular class. Because the class is large, we typically work in teams. And I don't know if you do a lot of group work here in Minho. Some people work harder than others sometimes, and you have to communicate with each other and hold each other accountable. And while that's challenging and frustrating, that is the real world, right? Most of us are working in teams and with colleagues, and we have to figure out how to get along. Personalities clash, work styles clash, and sometimes they work together beautifully. And so we have both of those experiences. And then I think I had said this already, kind of the additional demands. They need to communicate with the partner, they need to work on their professional communication skills to be able to do that. And then for me, it's more work, right? It's more work for everybody. It's more work because I'm now also feeling accountable to the partners. I want to make sure that they're constantly being communicated with and they know the progress of these teams. With large classes, sometimes you have multiple projects. So again, I need to say what else is happening in my semester. Can I take on all this extra work and manage all of these relationships? And then, of course, trying to assess student learning in this process when a lot of different people are doing different things and kind of figuring out different strategies for that. But I think, certainly, I keep doing this, so I definitely feel that the opportunities outweigh the challenges. So it's a unique opportunity for the skills development experience for the students. by and large, the students are even more motivated because it is connected to this real world project, and they often are directly, they don't have to go through me to talk to these partners, they're in direct communication with the partners. And because of that, it expands the student's social capital, right? Their network, their professional network. And oftentimes it helps, it leads to internships, it leads to consultancies, it's led to actual full-time job offers when they have had those opportunities. And if not, it at least is preparing them for the job search. When they walk into an interview, they can say, when I developed a curriculum for, when I worked with NRC on, and they have tangible examples that they can use in the interview process to talk about what they've learned and how they've learned it. And then again, I think I mentioned before, half joking, but it's kind of the reality faculty, and I'm assuming around the world, including here in Portugal, there's so many demands on our time. We're teaching, we're advising, we're doing research, we have our own interests and networks and partnerships and collaborations we're trying to manage. And so when I'm able to line up what I'm doing in class with these larger projects, it's a survival strategy for me, and it helps kind of dovetail, as we say, kind of connect the dots between these different things and create these synergies that tend to lead to additional collaborative work. And also, I'm being very selfish here, but then I get to observe and I get to identify really strong students for the next semester when there's another project or another exciting opportunity, or Dean emails me and asks me, if there's a good potential intern that could apply for a job, I can say, yes, there it is, and send, tell those 5 students to apply, and hopefully, end up working with INEE or other organizations. So it's a great way for me to see who's doing what. And then I think just finally, the lessons learned are, just to manage expectations of myself, of the students, and of the partners as we come together. We have, on the one hand, a good stretch of time in an academic semester to do this work, but sometimes it doesn't line up so neatly with, NGO and UN schedules, so just kind of assessing those things. Making sure the partner organizations are willing to put the time in as well. Sometimes they just want to say, here, do this, and good luck. And that usually doesn't lead to the best possible outcomes, right? So the more engagement we have from them, we're better able to meet their needs. And of course, the students are really thrilled when they get to talk to a practitioner who can say, I really like what you developed, but have you thought about the multilingual classroom you're talking about? Have you thought about the psychosocial trauma that your kids, the kids that will receive this curriculum, are walking into the school with? Have you thought about how parents could be involved in what you're proposing, right? So they're able to bring this other level of the real world scenario into the conversation. And of course, some projects are going to be more successful than others, and that can be a little bit hit or miss. It's hard to anticipate, the group of students that's going to come together, how motivated they are, if they have the feedback that they needed from their partners. But just to prepare everybody to be really flexible and adaptable, because again, it's the real world. Things happen, things slow down, things speed up, and to be able to work and kind of understand the pace of the field of education and emergencies. And to get a real sense of it, do they want to enter that field? Do they want to pursue a career or a professional pathway given these experiences and given what they've learned in the process? So these are just a few examples and my reflections as preparing for today about how to really build on these synergies, think about how it's beneficial to the students and their own professional aspirations, and then of course these different international actors who could use some help from time to time advancing their work. And so, really trying to harness those synergistic relationships to move the work forward and to make a contribution to the field. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. Now I think there's some time for some questions. If you want to make one or two questions to Mary before we move forward. Just one question here. Those courses are just in running the faculty. They don't have actually to go to do something on site. Maybe only when they are doing their final project or something like that, is it?
Yeah, so it depends. Are we being recorded or not?
Yes, we need the mic. Okay. So yes and no. For the most part, they're happening on campus, but for example, the Urban Refugee Education Project, the students that were in that course that were also, some of them were serving as graduate research assistants, and then they went, one faculty and one student went to each of those countries to actually do the data collection and the research and wrote up the studies. in the teacher professional development focus course, several students were able to go with me to Kakuma to pilot the training, and then have continued to do that work because we've been successful with it, raised more money, expanded the project, and so now I have a team of 10 students, and almost all of them have been able to go to the field as a result. Yeah, which is a big added bonus for all of us. Yeah.
Questions? You can do it in Portuguese if you like, and I try to translate. No? I have to just, if you can have questions if you want to. Do you think that these collaborative projects are more effective? And I'm thinking about also students' maturity and experience and background in the graduation courses or in post-graduation courses?
Yeah. I guess I'm not sure I can give a good answer to that because I've only had the opportunity to teach at the graduate level. And so I can't compare that with the college students. I have had a few college students from Columbia University come to take classes, and I mean, the ones who are interested in doing that tend to be exceptionally motivated to begin with, and so they're keen to get involved. Yeah, so I don't think I have a comparative perspective to be able to offer that. But even at the graduate level, you know, some folks that I would find, you never know. Somebody I could find who's incredibly reserved and quiet in class just comes to life when they get involved in a project. And so you just kind of want to, you do your best to figure out what the right fit is. Yeah.
Okay, so we can move forward to another perspective from Luís, and I'm talking about a little bit of Luís. Luís is from our house. He's from School of Architecture here at the University of Minho. He is a PhD student. Is it true? Yeah, a PhD student in the Catholic University of Leuven. He's an architect. And he's responsible, or he's the teacher in charge of a discipline that is called emergency urbanism. So you think it would be very on purpose this talk. And I already saw some parts of your presentation, I must say, because Julie sent it to me just to be acquainted with the subject, and I enjoy it very much already. So I think you're going to enjoy too. Luís, please.
Well, thank you, first of all, for this opportunity to share my experience. It's basically what I'm going to do, to present the work we do in the School of Architecture. And I hope you can together reflect a bit of, particularly, I came with the expectation of the multidisciplinary approach idea. I'll go try to go fast on this. When Julie spoke to me about speaking about my work, as I work mostly as an architect, I thought he wanted me to speak about the work I had done considering schools in Angola, the good practice design. And I immediately started preparing it, and then I realized it had a different purpose. But I put just this slide, which is a wonderful architectural building in Luanda. It's an adaptation. It's from the 60s. I visited for that work I was speaking about. You can see the joy of the children, a marvelous light coming in, beautiful colors, the classrooms that are over those spaces. And when we visited the last store, I came to this place, it's the toilet. And it's one of the most important features as an architect to consider. This is in central city, capital city in Angola, and it was destroyed. So I use this just to give a note about the importance, considering context, considering the low dependence on technological issues, not only in the toilets, but in everything we do, and the importance that, for instance, this will affect young ladies that are going to school, they're starting to menstruate, for instance, And if they don't have proper hygienic conditions, they will stop going to school. So you got half of the population that will be affected for it. Then the way they got into it, which is it's an intimate place, so the safety of the children that get into it. So there's a lot of cultural issues. So the older people that could watch the students go inside the toilet, so when they came out, to make sure that they would wash their hands. This type of behavior is quite important for us as architects to implement and to help and to relate with the other conditions that I was speaking about. But getting to the subject of emergency urbanism, I would say that it sticks basically to great phenomena. Ideas. First, the phenomenon of precarious habitability. So I want to underline, I'm not speaking specifically of war or catastrophe response, but at a broader level to situations of people who live beneath the minimum standards. And then the second part would be the basic habitability with its own instruments that go beyond or differ from what is the usual architectural tools to deal in our context. Of course, an important thing is the students' profile that we have, which is quite diverse in this course, and already help us to get insights by those students of different contexts, different situations, and help them create the idea of discussion and hearing the other. Because at the end of the day, we know that the territory formation doesn't depend, as some colleagues of mine or students might think, only to the technicians, but it depends of all of us on our daily life and the decisions that we take. So, of course, this is bounded by specific contexts that changes with space and time. So I insist on this idea that what might be a wonderful insight and desire for an architect or a Western cultural person with full of cultural references like this flat in Chicago Lakeshore Drive apartments aren't properly the one that someone living in this type of context would aim or would afford or would even wish for their own lives. So this change of mindset, it's absolutely fundamental for the students to understand the reality that we are working with. Another thing is the scale of the phenomenon. When we look at the urban process, the global process that we are facing, we can see that since the end of the Second World War, the Western world hasn't changed so much the amount of housing demand. It's mostly the urban areas of the less developed countries. So this is where we got about 30% of the population living in slum-like conditions, and we expect that it's possible until 2030 to build around or over 300 million of new adequate houses and schools and health centers around the world. So this means, to give an idea, building the total houses in Portugal every 2 months, or twice the size of Europe in these 12 years. Just to give an insight to the scale of the phenomenon. Because these people are living in these zones of risks with no minimum services, no comfort, without dignity, which is lack of citizenship rights, and in spaces where we don't have public space use, equipment, infrastructures, supply, collection, emergency services. So you're living greater exposure to catastrophes, and at the same time you have people that have a tremendous will to improve their life conditions, but of course they're focused on their own needs with the scarce means that they have. So the bigger dimension that gets out of this effort, usually it's the public dimensions, the common services. So we put a huge effort in that sense. The first class that we give to help with discussion, I use a video of an intervention in Cape Verde. It's precisely this idea of I am the other. I transport to myself the culture of the other, the Eastern Mediterranean. the genetic bond that I have from your field, you know. So we to forget this opposition to the other and to find what we have of common, while at the same time I can understand that my next door neighbor might have a different opinion from my own. So it's a twice-dimensional perspective. We use this video because it's very interesting the way it puts the bucket in different groups. I use the word conflict here, not in the term that we have been hearing today. Conflicts in sense of discussion in different opinions, different ways of looking things. And so you put the students in face of through the video of different perspectives and how they manage to articulate their will in order to get common ground so they can prospect to a better condition in their program. We give basic concepts like precarious habitability with a minimum that I have said without the minimum conditions, and then the basic habitability concept which defines the minimum that we find as dignifying, but may change according to place and context. So what I might find the minimum adequate for me will differ in a different culture and in a different context. You know? It should always integrate the basic medical service, educational service, and the guarantee of economical income. So on the projects that we analyze or we develop, make sure that these dimensions are, or we try to grasp them and to guarantee these minimums. There's the historic component that we speak also about. I won't go much further on it. And framing this concept through specific examples. Amartya Sen is one of the most important references from the economic field. And having this idea of development based on life expectancy, degree of education achieved, and the economic level of income. On the other side, a broader perspective like the example of one of the first, the fathers of the planning theory, which is Patrick Getz from the 19th century. He created this observatory in Edinburgh where people could go and observe how people would behave in urban life. And then they would give feedback and give their own opinion of how the city should be planned. You know? Or other examples, I just give a few notes in order to pass this idea. Hassan Faiti, an Egyptian architect, in the 40s, in the moment of the most important moment in the post-war period of modern architecture, he decided to construct houses, schools, communities with mud, with the earth, which was the material that he had available in rural Egypt. So this empathy to the context and to the means that we have available, it's one of the important features. On the other side, I give a short example of Lele, a Brazilian architect who planned several prefab systems easily to transport to the favelas, and in a very quick, short time managed to build 200 schools in the state of Goiás in Brazil. So different types of approaches according to context and to available means. Having always in the background this idea of the incidence of self-construction, participation of the people, the benefits of habitat development on individuals, and the full implementation of their capabilities. So I would say, if you allow me, that our teaching methodology is basically inductive. We use the case studies to get the students faster to get to know conditions of analysis and successful solutions. But at the same time, this is not perfectly, there's a change of format. I hope you're managing to get everything. It did change a bit what I prepared. But I was saying, I try to promote a lot. It's fundamental when preparing students to go to this, eventually to the field, sharing their own personal experiences. We do open classes with prominent guests. They came from different parts of the world. So try to get the students in touch with concrete field operations, study visits to promote context analysis in direct contacted communities, and in-depth analysis, which is a group studies. There's one of my students here, and they have the opportunity to do a work that in the beginning it seems impossible for some of them. When I say you're going to study a favela in India, I say, we don't have information. Well, you're going to fight for it and you're going to manage. And that sense that today we managed to do that. 10 years ago it was not, it was really difficult, but today it is possible. And so this sense of achieving, even the information already helps them to there's a sense of empowerment of the student himself. We do this study trip, which is to Barroso, it's beyond the mountains that you can see when you go outside. It's just 45 kilometers from here, which is the same distance from the center of Porto City, the main city in North Portugal. And the students get really amazed with the difference of life that these communities have compared with our urban life here in Braga or in Porto. They get a chance to visit the homes of the local population. Also people that work, there are several communities that we visit. One is the previous mine workers. And so they get to see how people live nowadays, or their working conditions. This Mr. here, he was working as a syndicate member, so to get this idea of having the agents of the community to represent the community and to express their needs and their culture and their identity. So after this, the student is invited to do a travel notebook about this. It's a 2-day visit. And it's really interesting how this 2 days visit really appeals and get them an enthusiastic perspective towards this here in the community. Because I don't know how it is in your course, but in architectural school nowadays, the students are mostly focused doing the buildings, and there's not a practice of speaking with the users, which is the reason of doing architecture. And so, and if you are going to a quite different context, you really need to get to do this, because it's even harder of understanding their needs. So these are some of the guests that we have been having the last few years with a wonderful transmission of knowledge, and going through the four, this group work that we do goes through the 4 basic stages when we address human settlements, which I'll go fast. This is one example of one intervention in Mozambique that Julian Salas brought. Julian Salas is the creator of a master in Madrid. He came visited us last year, and this is a presentation that he had prepared for accountability of the Spanish cooperation in Mozambique. And the first thing is related to the election of a not vulnerable soil, the election of the place. This example it's related with a natural catastrophe, a flood that happened in southern Mozambique a few years ago. So they have to displace the village for a better place. And here I underline the importance of the multidisciplinary action of working with geographers, with topography, history, speaking with the community that maybe don't have the documents, but you can hear people to know where when you have a flood, until what level it got. So this is the first really important decision. The second is what we call the rational land parceling. So in this case, there were several, an exercise that was done in the School of Madrid, where the students proposed several possibilities, and then through interaction with the local community, they came to improve the best solution, and it was the one that eventually got to be put into practice. It is in the rural area of Mozambique, so we have large plots, so they have this economic idea of productive activity that I spoke before. So latrines, family, communal home gardens, a nursery for plants. So this idea of economic activity, the drinking water wells, absolutely fundamental. Bakery, market, 260 house, the school, and the health center. These are basic services that we must keep in our minds always. The idea of the home, in this case, there are several possible ideas that obviously you have to adapt to the context and to the specific situation. It's what you call the house germ, so it's a very small beginning of a house with the minimum resources that you have available, with the expectation that with time it will improve. So people will get a better condition, and by their own effort they will be able to improve the results. So we have this idea of process, a permanent idea, focus, sorry for the English, on the processes instead of products. No? So people, what if you don't have resources? What are you going to use to build? It's the earth itself, as I pointed before, as an example. I underline also the importance of women in these processes. In this case, particularly, it was a community where most of the men are immigrated to South African mines. So the ladies remained in the community, and this is a very common situation all over the world. It's not only in Africa, even in South America. So it's the women who really built the home. We have adobe brick here, and it's a common process. It's a communitarian process. People dance, people share this process, which gives them to me also a sense of empowerment. And then this also the communal reunion of people discussing who is going to benefit of each plot, who needs to get it first according to the needs. So it's a process of continuous discussion, and which I believe there's an informal level of education that passes by through this. It's an opportunity that we have of implementing also a sense of sharing and discussing, respecting their own way of dealing with it. So, as for the architectural student, you should understand his role, among others, of facilitating these strategy processes through two basic ideas of learning from what there is of useful in their spontaneous way of doing, and with his own technical and multidisciplinary approach, other groups of knowledge, to improve the weaker parts of these spontaneous processes. So it's also related with the action of the architect anywhere, not only in this context, to his ability to coordinate work team and different types of knowledges that go from the legal features, economical, relating with geography, sociology, engineering. So different, different agents, stakeholders that we have to put into dialogue in order to come to conclusions. No? In this case, we always have this doubt of providing finished objects for few beneficiaries, or at a lower extent, less of that, but with a broader amplitude. We are already discussing features of low-cost urbanization. I'll go a bit over this in order to don't make it too long. I had an example, for instance, of a deaf school in Mauritania, which was an extraordinary example of architecture done by the people. It's a communitarian work. We had a video about this in 3 stages. And what I wanted to underline here is, again, this importance of involving the population. It's one of the problems that sometimes, if you don't manage to get the population interested, if you try to say that what you need is a school, or it's not a health center, then you're going totally the wrong way. So yeah, this ability to hear according to which community will prioritize before. Of course, it also depends on a lot of factors. I believe personally the teaching is really one of the most relevant, if not the most relevant feature, but it has to be with the population agreement to reach such conclusion. I briefly, to conclude, present for instance, the type of analysis that the students do, looking at economic activity, religious, cultural features, analyzing the urban space and individual homes, either in the favela in India, a slum that I expressed before in Bombay, or the conditions in a refugee camp in Jordania, where you can see the different stages and appropriation that is done by the families since the moment they arrive until, as it was said today already, one of the biggest problems in the refugee camps, in the beginning they tend to be, I will put it very simply, to think that it's an immediate thing, that you're just doing this, we have to give a very quick response and then we'll see what we're going to do. And this very quick response, we have examples all over the world, usually remains for decades. So it's extremely important to, from the first moment, and what was said today about university teaching, that during the conflict itself, you're already thinking what you're going to do to prepare the action. So when you do it, you have a definite way. Well, last slide, I brought, considering mostly challenges for our university community, some pedagogical and professional challenges I believe we can address. Just a few ideas. A problem we have in Portugal is the absence of a clear national strategy. I believe today it is possible to captate national and foreign experience technicians, not only to the university but to professional work. It's important to create educational programs which I believe should, speaking for the architectural field, should have a multidisciplinary approach. So we can train specialized professionals. I apologize if I may offend someone, but I truly believe this actually should have a professional background, even if then it incorporates volunteer work, where there's a lot of mess that is done with the goodwill of volunteer work by itself alone. Building strategic partnerships, networking, some of these have already been done, of course. Very important, I would say, this reception of students and researchers from intervention areas, because this way, as I said, it's the first link you can get to these places that we might interfere. And produce a specialized knowledge, and most important, disseminate, applicate, and deepening the produced knowledge, which is related with a strategic approach instead of a short coming. Well, thank you. I hope I can take too much time.
So we have a brief moment for one or two questions. You have one?
If these
programs, these educational programs and disaster architecture.
the ones I refer are issues that are done. For instance, the disaster reaction, I always ask a guest to speak about it because I don't have field experience and I feel it's really very specific issues.
All students are involved in this programs. All architectural students from
They analyzed, it's mostly related with analysis. We work from here towards actions that have been developed all over the world. Well, it's a small course, so what we do is we try to get them in touch with as much and as diverse agents as possible. It might be architects, it might be neighbors associations, so that they try to get as much to understand. So it's an introductory course. This is not an extremely large course, so but we speak about these subjects that I spoke about in every of these courses. And I think, as I said, the most important, in my opinion, is the mindset change. Is try to prepare to this, and I recommend all the students, if they really get touched, let's say like this call, to get specialized training that we are not in Portugal. In Portugal, now there's a very small course in Lisbon, but in Spain we already have many offer, and all over Europe, not only. And so I usually advise that, well, you should first try to get some information and then go to the field, also fundamental to a field experience.
Any other question? I have to move forward because time flies, I'm sorry. I think probably vai ser uma disciplina, se estudamos de emoção. So now we're going to our last presentation of today. Pedro Morgado is also a professor of University of Minho from School of Medicine. So we are going moving from architecture to medicine. And he's going to talk us about medical education in emergency situations. I'm just going to briefly talk a little bit about his track. Sorry, this is not the biography, here it is. Pedro, as I was saying, he's an assistant professor in the School of Medicine. He's a psychiatrist working at the Hospital of Braga also. He's a research member of the Clinical Academic Center of Hospital of Braga, and he's a researcher in ECVS, Synergies, associate laboratory at the University of Minho. He's involved in national and international research projects. He's focused on neuronal basis of decision-making process. I think this is very important because many important pivotal decisions have to be made when we are dealing with this projects. Because this is a very interesting matter. It's not just a matter of doing a voluntary service here or there, because it's nowadays it's in the order of some ideas, but this is a very important matter. It has to be done very consciously. He's involved in both basic and clinical research. Exploring also interactions between chronic stress and neuropsychiatric disorders. He's involved in both basic and clinical research, and his recent work is focused on obsessive compulsive spectrum disorders. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank the invitation to be here, and also to read the School of Education, the Institute of Education, for this very relevant meeting. To be completely honest, I have to say that I'm a little bit ashamed because the previous presentations were fantastic and very, very focused. And I'm completely out of the field, as you can hear. I do not work on disaster medicine, and this happened because we don't have so much experience on the field. When Professor Júlio Pedrosa talked with me about education in emergencies, this topic was completely out of our priorities. To contextualize, we are a school of medicine with 17 years old, and we were founded to improve the healthcare in Portugal, because at that time we had lower medical doctors than we need. But the reality changed in the recent years, so we have to keep in attention other opportunities to our students, and we are very, very interested on this type of networks and synergies. So we talk about disaster medicine because for us in the medical field, emergency is another thing, because we all work with emergencies every day, but in a safe context, in the context of the hospital. So to make the border between the two fields, we use the term disaster medicine, which is a demanding and a complex job, because the environment is very stressful and there are lots of uncertainty in the context of catastrophes. So we need to have very well structured responses, which include rapid and effective paradigms, and also we have to have an interdisciplinary approach that includes, of course, the health services, the security, the civil engineering knowledge, and also the architecture, and of course education. So we are committed with this goal of build a multidisciplinary approach to deal with disasters and catastrophes. I have to say that the interest in publishing articles on this topic have increased a lot after 9/11 in New York, and as you can see here, this is a very hot topic on the medical field. So this is a very nice opportunity to us to look at this field and to start doing research and being engaged in more educational programs on this field. We live in a safe country, but no one is immune to disasters. So we also see this field as an opportunity to afford money, because for each dollar or euro that we invest on prevention, we can afford in the future, as we can reduce by $7 the cost of the response programs to deal with disasters. So we see this as an opportunity to us. What about medical schools in this field? I will present our experience here at the University of Minho, which is very similar in the other medical schools in Portugal. We have 8 medical schools, and I talked with the colleagues from each of them, and basically the scenario is the same. As I said previously, when we think about emergency, this is the unique image that occurs in our mind, because we do a lot of work to prepare our students to work in emergency room, and we have to shift this paradigm. We train medical students basically in 2 different scenarios. One is the simulation lab, in which students can train with standardized patients, which basically are actors that play specific roles. And we also use high fidelity simulators to improve the knowledge and the abilities of our students dealing with emergency situations. In the hospital, they deal with real patients, so this is the second part of our training. And in what concerns to global health opportunities, we also have some scenarios in which students can deal with this topic. But I have to say that this topic is poorly represented in our medical curriculum. We have some short talks on global health and on disaster medicine. We have some optional both clinical and research electives in which students can go abroad. And we have also, when we participate and we support a clinical exchange program, which is basically organized by students throughout their students' association. So the students raise the curriculum on global health by themselves, and this is a matter of concern to us, so we are very committed to change this. This is an example of a project that was designed and implemented by 3 of our medical students, and it was in Africa and had a great impact on national media. But these examples are few than we want, so we are trying to revert this situation, and we are trying to reshape the medical education we provide to our students. So, what are we planning to do? We are planning to include some of these topics as in the core curriculum. That means that we are working to have some scenario-based training in disaster medicine, because this is the very well documented and very the most effective way of learning how to behave in this type of situations. Other of our priorities is to provide postgraduate training on disaster medicine, and we have two proposals with this new postgraduate training. One is to raise the competencies of medical doctors on this topic. The other one is to deal with the increasing number of medical doctors without any specialization in Portugal. So this can be an opportunity to go abroad and to be engaged in other type of projects. So we are very committed with this too. Another thing is to participate and to build synergies in projects like this, not only to receive students from conflict areas, but also with universities abroad in that areas that are in conflict or in war, and also to exchange, to participate in exchange programs for professors, for faculty. So we have some professors that are interested in going abroad to these areas, and as a school we are very interested in promote this exchange, and also to receive, to provide training, to provide training to teachers from these conflict areas. And basically that's what I have to share with you. As I said previously, we don't have so much experience on the field, so I'm here more to hear from others and to catch the opportunity to join this network.
Okay, any question to Pedro? I have some. How do you perspective that some part of the training could be also in the conflict context, or I didn't understood if the idea was just to do things with simulators and actors. I don't know. But also I think that we be in site.
Yeah, I think that the easy way is to train all students in a simulation environment, and then to give the opportunity for some of them that wants to go to the conflict areas. I think that it is not possible, and there are lots of students, of course, that are not motivated to this type of intervention, so we have to respect this.
So I think we are coming to an end for this section. I'm asking if you have any more questions or have some ideas I would like to share with you, but first, Alexandra, yes.
It's
Sorry.
not really a question, it's more a comment, but we can start with that. Because I found it was very interesting that it was completely different approaches to the issue. But I think everyone spoke about the interdisciplinary and the need for working with an interdisciplinary group. And that I found it was very interesting, because sometimes we tend to look at just our a completely different thing.
Yeah.
And also for our students, when we talk about them and going abroad, they have these ideal expectations. I imagine in medicine it could be, there are lots of films and series about the romantic part of that. And so managing these expectations, I think it's quite a challenging job also for us to think. And I wanted you to comment on a provocation that Luis said about the volunteer versus professional, and how does that, how can we work on that? Because it's important to have volunteers and to have people willing to go to the field and do some work, but that doesn't seem enough, or it can also not be the best thing. So I would like to hear a little bit about it.
Want to reply?
Well, I can reply, but I'm not the best person to do it, but I'm glad to express my view. I have basically much feedback from people that are in the, as I said, I keep this in touch with the people. I remember, for instance, speaking in this context, we were speaking about disasters, when it was the Sri Lanka, the tsunami. There were people, I got this impression for completely different people from all over the world. There's a lot of volunteers that immediately, it was Christmas, because everybody got really emotional with that, and they just decided that they wanted to help. And people in the field later, what they said, it was totally unorganized, that there wasn't coordination. I'm speaking by what I heard. It's not in the first person. I want to underline this. But still, and a lot of the work was totally useless, and even sometimes it was an obstacle that you had to go over, no? And there's the thing that's not a promise also, we have a lot of interest from the students. Usually, I know I understood your question. It's an optative, as most of the courses are, but I was asked to prepare a course for like 12, 15 students. In architecture, we usually have small classes. 12, 15 students, and I usually have like 25, because it's really, there's a lot of interest on the students' side, I can say that, not only here, but I find that everywhere, about these issues. But sometimes this comes along with a romanticized perspective. And so we have to balance these ideas, and I try to pass that. I don't have so much in-field experience, so as I said, I'm putting forward for the works I did. Most of the work I did with Africa mainly was through partnerships. I developed the work here and I visit, but we keep facing this thing. So, of course, it's wonderful to have volunteering work. I don't want to say that the volunteer work shouldn't exist. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that you should do a professional approach. In Portugal, we should start to get a kind of national platform that could organize, create the synergy that we are speaking about, and then you can incorporate the volunteering according to the needs and the possibilities. Of course, this is always a lot of informality, and but really, I think that's what I want to say.
I was just thinking about the similar issue we had with education. So whether it was the tsunami or the earthquake in Haiti, you know, we have students or friends, and maybe many in the room, who said they're going to get on a plane and just go because they know they'll be helpful and they can help start a school again, or they can, and they could be an impediment, to your point, what you saw or what you heard in the Sri Lanka response. And so we have something, I don't know if there's a translation in Portuguese, but in English we call it voluntourism. So it'd be a combination of being a volunteer and being a tourist. And it's a tricky, contentious thing to think about, right? Because we want to go in and do genuine work and be helpful. And I think there are many young people who haven't had field experiences, and they think, well, they're are popping up around this idea of voluntourism, and students are being asked to pay a lot of money to take trips to do service work for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but then tour around be a tourist and enjoy the trip. And I struggle with that because these agencies come to our university and they want to recruit our students. And I just think that's not maybe the approach that we're trying to advocate for. And so both thinking about, these immediate crises and people wanting to go and help, but maybe there are better ways to help than actually going to that particular country. So looking at the Red Cross or looking at other organizations that are able to harness this outpouring of support in a more productive way. And I just had a question for Luis, can I ask? So I was it was great to hear you talk about the participation of the community in the design work, and that's something that we talk a lot about in education and emergencies, right? The importance of community participation. And I just wondered if you, how do you talk about that with your students, or how do you teach your students to then know how to engage in what I would authentic community participation? Because I think we still struggle in the education emergencies field. We talk about participation as a core principle, but I think we often do it quite superficially or in a really tokenistic way. And so I'm just curious on your side in architecture, how do you try to get students to understand or to know how to do and engage and work collaboratively with community members?
First of all, I think practice is the best way to try to do it, and I try to explain when I spoke about these exercises that I spoke for instance, the study. I'll just go back, you're speaking about the volunteering work. One of the things that I always say is that you can do it at your doorstep. If you want something that you want to help other people, you can start here and first see if you really feel comfortable, let's say, because don't go to a place where people have really, really huge needs and you cannot go there to have fun. So that's a message that I pass back. About community participation, there are several, let's say, tools. There's a lot of things that we do, both in research, and it should start, in my opinion, from the first decisions, meaning the programmatic decisions. What are we going to do, where, how are we going to get the funds, until the designing process, the construction process, and the maintenance process, and even eventually the close of the cycle with the demolition substitution. That's where with a sustainable perspective. And then I was saying the study trip because what I tried to do is just give a glimpse of having the students to speak with the local communities, people that live in villages and so on. In Porto, for those who are here, there's a EiE, which is a kind of a 19th century working class housing. There's a lot of communitarian type of life there. I have another course also, which is a course related with our context. So the first thing I think is that when you start to really hear what people want, what people need, things will go naturally. But we have several tools. So we have the discussion groups, a lot of things that we have what you call the topographic design, helping people, we do maps of habits, how people live in the village, where is the place where they meet, where they, what time of the day they go there. So you try to map their existing habits, so when you design, you already understand better how they live. But so there are other, this is non-stop. But this image that I put of the doing the adobe bricks, that is wonderful. I think that image, for instance, you have that image also. I wanted to say, I didn't mention that you are also training people for an activity, a skill, and it has happened. I have, for instance, in Portugal, we have, in my opinion, Joana Carneiro, she's an architect. She's presently working for Red Cross. Probably some of you might even know her. And she has done work in refugee camps in Somalia and Kenya. This idea, they didn't have absolutely anything. They had the claims, conflicts, that there was a presentation that referred about it. And they got them and I didn't speak about this here. I'm losing myself. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think we use some of the similar drawings and things in the community to help us better understand.
Yeah, but have a food together. I think it's always the best thing.
Yeah.
Get people to eat together.
Get together everywhere.
As friends. It's one of the results.
I think there are different levels of doing service or to help in an emergency context. Even I think we could speak a bit of a professional level. If you are going to do there to make houses and schools is one thing. The other thing is to going to an educational context. You already need a space. Maybe you have to go first and to settle everything very keen for us, and then we can maybe give the help with retailing and resuming the education that was cut during some natural or non-natural disaster. Coming back to the central part of education in an emerging context, by your experience and all the experience that is there also, can we picture into perspective, in the perspective of giving a coherent program of integrating a coherent program of education, trying to identify the skills and attitudes and abilities that should be taught or also at least observed, and the profile for the professional or the educator or the facilitator that goes there to help in that context. Can we do a profile of a person or of a program, the main things that are core things that we have to bring with us? Is it possible to make this question? Is it possible for anyone to do this, or is there a special profile to do this?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I can give you a great answer. I think it's something we're discussing. We were actually discussing it the last couple of days in the INEE meetings, and we were talking about what are the capacity development needs of a typical, whatever that is, education emergencies practitioner. And I think many of us would come at that from different perspectives. And so I think there are some, we were talking about fundamental skills, we were talking about developing a competency framework that would help us not only think about these profiles of people, but then also the different types of support and mentoring and professional development structures we might put into place. I do think it's a bit tricky to do that though, and to have kind of one person, one profile in mind, because you can think about needing to have the the project design skills to be able to think conceptually about what needs to be done, to engage in meaningful needs assessments in the community, to get that participation and that community buy-in, to then actually implement the project, monitor and evaluate the project. So that's already one really pretty complicated set of skills. And then at the same time, to the point we were making in the morning session, there's advocacy that has to be done. There's policy making that has to be done. There's fundraising that has to be done. We're increasingly talking about how do you bridge the humanitarian sector with the development sector. And I think in actuality, the skill sets to do that are fundamentally different. And so I remember in my own dissertation research, hearing a colleague say, as she was trying to help her staff learn to make that bridge, that they're so used to showing up and giving out resources and building quick schools and the quick fix. And now they have to talk about diplomacy and negotiations with ministries of education, and it's a very different set of skills. And so it's rare that one person would encapsulate all of that.
But the group of skills that should be the minimum.
Absolutely.
That has to be there, not in one person.
Yeah. So even with that, because I know we're running out of time here, but even with that, I think if you have the person who's able to conceptualize and implement, or have help the staff implement a project, you have that, and that could be applied. That skill set could be applied across architecture, medicine, and education. And then on education, on the professional side, we need somebody who knows what they're doing in education. We need somebody who knows about curriculum and teacher training and teaching and learning materials and issues of inclusion and disabilities, and so that's another layer. So sometimes we get people who have the project design skills that are great, but they haven't studied education. And they're being thrown into contexts where they're kind of learning that on the job. Or the other way around, where they have the education profile, and now they're thrown into an emergency context, and they're being asked to learn how to write what we call a logical framework for monitoring and evaluation, or to whip together a donor proposal. And so it's trying to kind of meld those two together. I think it's possible, but I think we can do a better job in graduate schools, and I think we can do a better job in the field, and that's, I think, a lot of the discussion we're having within INEE. How can we better create those opportunities to bring different skill sets, but necessary skill sets together?
I think also skills like, I ask this because what I'm learning now and what I'm listening, other skills, different inner resources we have, like the empathy, the capacity to mobilize the people, to understand the difference and different needs, and to be able to talk and to perceive this and integrate those signs from the communities. I think it's a very important in this particular context, just not being very the most expert in physics or architecture or whatever. That, of course, that's important to build the proper thing, but then to do the melting that is necessary in that particular sharp, difficult situation. I think there are other skills that should be put in the field also, definitely. And those skills are not very easy
The only thing
to
is that I
find.
don't think there are soft skills because they are critical.
Yeah,
to
they
this
are
soft
soft but critical.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the term soft skill is not very,
Yes, it's not very.
does not fit.
It's exactly what we meant to say when we say soft
It's
skills.
for medical doctor. Communication is a hard skill. Why do we call it soft?
Okay, thank you very much. We have to close this section. An applause for our invited speakers. We enjoy very much the talks.
Welcome back, everybody. We've just finished 3 incredible sessions. I found myself fascinated and jealous that I couldn't ask questions because everybody was so fascinated with the topics and we ran out of time. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to hear from the 3 facilitators for each of the sessions. We had a session on teaching and capacity development, another on research and knowledge management, another session on trends, and I wish I could have gone to all 3, but it just physically wasn't possible. So we're going to hear a bit of a summary of what was discussed. So if we could start at the end, and we'll just work our way this way.
Thank you for coming back. I don't know if I can do a very good briefing because it was, as I was saying, here 2 people. Thank you. It was very different and challenging talk of Mary, and I'm going to read it. Building knowledge and skills in education emergencies through collaborative projects. She came and talked to us about this her heart project with collaborations and the importance of capitalizing NGOs to set in the field, they have the resources to set in the field many projects that she developed with her students in master courses and in graduation courses. Correct me if I'm wrong. And she talked us also about the challenges from the perspective of the students, and sometimes the difficulties the students have in enduring this type of courses. Some does better than others. Some lacking sometimes in communication skills, but there are a lot of opportunities also there. She thinks they can be very motivated for gathering together and centering this type of projects and problems, social problems. It's important for us if we are intending to, if our idea is also to establish a program that would, in University of Minho, for instance, it's important to fine-tune the timeline where we have the classes here and the courses, the theoretical and theoretical-practical courses, and what we can do in the field and practice in the field. I think practicing in the field is very important, and to understand the problems that are really there. Sometimes you have an idea what we are going to do, and when we get there with our backpack, it's completely different, and reality is completely different. And we talk about that with mainly with Luis and Pedro. Luis is an architect, and Pedro is a psychiatrist. So imagine the two different types of talk. And Luis told us, Luis Guimarães is a professor from the University of Minho, and he introduced a very incredible expression that I didn't know. It's precarious habitability, or the basic habitability. And the basic habitability, and I think you know what I mean. It is also very different from place to place, but it's the minimum core that people need to start feeling human again, and to try to get things together and try to work and try to study. And the house is very important, but the idea of a house is very different from people to people. So that is the first challenge when you go to a particular context too. And I think it's very interesting. He thinks this is very important to bring with us the notion of I am the other. I think it was a very interesting thing he said. The idea of being the other is make us available to change our ideas and to change our practices also, and to incorporate the different signs and the different needs that we face out there. It is also very important to speak with the users of our services, of our expertise are very important, because the idea of what I think is it is the most important thing, or it's the correct thing, maybe it's not the correct thing. Here in Portugal, well, not in Portugal, but some people used to say something interesting, that is, we have this aphorism that say, don't do to the others, what you don't want to harm us or something, but it's switch, it's the another way. It's, don't do to the others what you want them to do to you, because maybe what they want is not exactly the same thing. It's just this challenging idea that what we think, oh, I'm doing this too good, but, well, that's not good for the other. Maybe it's bad for the other. And Pedro talked us about disaster medicine and how it will be important in this context of our university, but probably in other universities from Portugal or abroad, to introduce in the core curriculum of their students the study of disaster medicine. And he said something very interesting. It's for them, there is emergency medicine is every day. So they don't have emergency medicine, because emergency medicine occurs every day in the hospitals. the idea for them of emergency, it's very different. It's the disaster medicine, and he thinks it's very important to include that in the curriculum, because there are many professionals that physicists that have to have that skills if they want to practice in the emergency context in the conflict area. And there are many professionals that want and seek for that information, and it's not really in their curricula by now. The interdisciplinary approaches, again, very important. It is transversal to all the talks, is the importance of getting together not only multidisciplinary approach, but really an interdisciplinary approach is when the two is together is more than the sum of the parts. Again, interdisciplinary is very different from multidisciplinary. It's not gluing some layers and hope that everything fits and goes okay. So I think I'm not extending too much. I would just add something, but probably in the end, I'll let my colleagues make their briefing also.
Okay, I'll just be very brief. We had a very interesting discussion and a series of sessions from Mark from World Vision, from Leonora from UNESCO INEE, and from Judith from ECHO. In a sense, we looked at the similar kind of things from different angles, looking at trends in the EiE, a lot of it about the architecture, the setup of the education in emergencies industry, sector, however you want to define it. We looked at its history, where did it come to, and then going forward. Very, very interesting. I think the big theme of it was that the recognition now, post the humanitarian summit and so forth, of the complexity of the problems, and then obviously the fact that we'll need equally complex responses and solutions sort of to it, and then how we design and implement those highly complex, multifaceted, multi-funded and multi-implemented kind of responses, specifically if they're not just to respond but also to prevent and to prepare and these kind of things. So it was a genuinely very interesting discussion. A lot of things that came out of it, particularly around funding. If it's going to be new areas of funding, what does that mean? For example, for the private sector, that's the sort of the elephant in the room. Everybody wants to kind of know about. Also, obviously, governments, how we incorporate them and so forth. But a lot of interest in that complexity, in sort of blowing open education and emergencies to be much wider, much larger kind of thing, but then figuring out what that means. But one thing that was good that Leonora mentioned was the importance of it, of not just doing response, but doing preparedness and so forth as well. Was that $1 spent before was equivalent to saving $7 spent in recovery after an emergency or a crisis kind of thing. So it definitely is at the very minimum worth it in that sense.
Okay, so I'm going to reflect back on the second group, which was discussing research and knowledge management. We also had 3 very insightful presentations. The first sharing was by Julio and Jose, both connected to the University of Minho, and they discussed their doctoral program. So this is a 3-year program on education, cooperation and development. And they discussed how the field of education in emergencies is being taken up as a focus area, and some of the specific PhD trajectories and focus areas that came out of that study. And in the discussion afterwards, the discussion focused on the role of the specific language, Portuguese language, and how Portuguese language is connected very much also to Portuguese development cooperation, and how issues of power also kind of feed into that connection to language as part of what we study, but also as part of the practice and the collaboration within that cooperation sector. So then from language and power, we shifted the discussion to knowledge and power, and the power of knowledge, as Henny started her presentation. So Henny Laman from New York University presented on the Journal of Education in Emergencies, which is a relatively new journal in the field, which tries to provide a platform for both researchers as well as practitioners to share knowledge, to share their insights. And we had a discussion on the practicalities of the research of the journal and how to get work into the journal. And I think any of those questions can be directed to Hedy. We see it over there. We also had a discussion on what is rigorous research, and that rigorous research is not necessarily only the maybe more positivist inspired research, but that interdisciplinary mixed methods research, as well as qualitative and ethnographic research and reflections from the field, for the field notes are all important ways of reflecting on the evidence and knowledge in this field. So then, speaking about rigorousness, and I think that Paul just left the building. I saw him sneaking around the corner, but Paul Frisoli from the International Rescue Committee, he presented last in our group, and he shared a very interesting collaboration, connecting back to the first presentation, between another colleague from New York University, a PhD candidate there, who is more focusing on quantitative methods of their research, and then the work of IRC in the Syria response and how teacher professional development was being monitored and measured, and how that was feeding back into the way that teachers were supported. And that ended up in a very interesting and rich discussion around how do you design such frameworks. So I guess we moved from power and language to knowledge and rigorousness and back and forth, and established that in a way these settings and the framework that we have here in a day like this is extremely helpful to get together and to talk about these collaborations, not only in the bigger field but also between all of us here as individuals of a broader part of the broader community.
Thank you. So I've been tasked with the challenge of bringing this all together. But I guess, what I think about, I like the different terms that you brought up and that we discussed. Something that really hits me is the power of networks. And this event is an example of that, where we've brought together so many diverse actors, diverse fields, and we're seeing the connections. I mean, I've made a number of notes where the panel I was watching and listening to was talking about medicine, it was talking about architecture, it was talking about training new professionals, emerging practitioners, I think was the word that we used, and listening to that and really seeing so many connections and wanting to just really even delve into the topic more. But also something that stood out to me, and I think there's probably people in the room, it's also something I think many are actually really looking at, and it's the disconnect between we're preparing new professionals, but then how do we find those jobs? And I think as academics here and as you're preparing your coursework and looking for opportunities, and I think that's also where we need to reach out to the NGOs in the room to begin to think about how do we bring up this next generation. And those opportunities aren't always out there for young people. I spend a lot of my time talking with young professionals, looking for internships, looking for opportunities, asking me how, at lunch even today, Jonathan Miller and I were talking to young people about how we broke into the field. And there's all these different ways, but there's no real pathway. And a lot of times it's luck. And I think INEE is a network, and I think many of you in the room, we need to be thinking about that, because we need an intentional pathway for young people, young professionals, to do this work and to continue this important work that all of us here are engaged with. I guess we could open up to just one last word, because I think you had something you'd like to say.
Yeah, it's two things that I keep in mind by two different, I don't remember, I think it was Nikki who talked about this building. I don't know if it was you who started talking about this during the seminar. But for a moment, I was listening at you and thinking that how difficult it is to do peace building. And probably it's because peace is such a very complex and it's made of so many tangible and intangible conditions and assets and goods that we have. That I suddenly think what is important or what is the need to, or how could an engineer do peace or a human body, for instance, or nature from scratch, from atoms? It's impossible. It's very, very difficult because a human body or a person or nature it's a very complex thing made of many, many, many things. It's very easy to destroy. So this is very it's very easy to destroy also, but it's very difficult to put together again. So I think that thinking about safe places from our safe place to the world, I think probably it's important to teach also how to maintain peace, and not to rebuild peace, but to maintain peace, because it's like it's $1 in maintaining peace is trillions to recover it if it is destroyed. And I think even in our curriculum, maybe more information and more topics concerning our geopolitical situation, how to maintain peace, how to maintain our relations with our neighbors. I think we are losing that in our curriculum, even in the high school. When I was young, in the high school we have a discipline called politics, introduction to politics. Nowadays there's only math and physics and chemistry and biology and history. Those are very important, but we need more than that. We need the soft skills that we claim them in the higher education. We need the students to be critical thought and who be active and who be proactive and who be entrepreneur and to be all these things. But from the basic school to the high school, we only put hard data on their heads. And so it's very difficult to maintain all these things. So we have also to train the peace maintenance more than. And the other complete different thing is we need the internet everywhere. Because if you want a modern school, if you want to have access to all the facilities that are already put to our students here, most of the things are interesting things are also in the internet to do workshops and to train things and to very simulations and videos, and there are so many information that should be also made available in this context. Maybe we don't have to have too many things, you have to be in a safe place, but if you have there the world also to those students, I think it will gain a lot of possibilities of education in educational terms. I think these two ideas is something that I was thinking during all the talks, and I think I wanted to share with you.
Thank you. Anything else that you want to add? Okay. Just the final word, Giulio and Andrea and the INEE Secretariat in planning for this day, a real objective and learning goal for having this day was to really share and learn from each other, but I also personally wanted to learn from my colleagues who understand the Portuguese language communities, and there's so many lessons that we can learn from the work that has happened, and I think of Angola and all the different contexts out there, and so I think we met that objective too. So well done. And so I'd like to actually invite Alexandra, you were going to come and say a final word. Giulio, if you had something to say as well. Thank you. let me speak first. Yeah. Just really thank you so much to the University of Minho and for your hospitality. And this, I know, for all of us has been a real chance to see a new place, but also, I would say, you know, one of the INEE's priorities in our strategic plan is thought leadership. And this was a chance for us to really think through issues and talk with our colleagues here. I have felt at home the whole time, and I know everyone else has. And so just, you know, from me personally, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Just a few words. Eu falarei depois também um bocadinho em português, porque eu tenho sempre esta preocupação das pessoas que não entendem tudo aquilo que se deve entender, só pela comunicação completa. So just a few words to thank my colleagues here at the Institute of Education. There is someone who has done a lot of work to put all this together, and that person was Andreas Schwarz, and she did a lot. I have to mention my name because sometimes you have to do that. That's it, because I need to do that. Also, I'd like to thank all my colleagues and friends from INEE to help us to spread what someone once said, the INEE spirit. I like this concept. I like the idea of the INEE spirit. I think there is something linking all of us. And this was very important. I cannot imagine that when we tried to understand this area, and this was in 2004, a small group here in the northern Portugal to try to understand what is education emergencies. We sent an email to Chris Talbot. He was at IEP at that time. As you know, he was here last year actually, also talking to our students. Yeah. So I not imagine that, you know, after all these years, I don't know how many years now, 13 years maybe, that we could do this and be here together. So thank you very much for helping us, for supporting us, and I think this was a quite historical moment for our educational development here at this university, at least for me. Thank you very much. Então, traduzindo muito rapidamente, era só para dizer que em 2004, quando nós começámos esta área, nunca imaginámos chegar agora aqui com este tipo de encontro. Com tantas pessoas, com tantas organizações, com tantos colegas que têm este trabalho de uma forma também muito profissional, quer na perspectiva da academia, quer na perspectiva das ONGs. É de facto um momento histórico em termos do nosso, eu diria, do nosso desenvolvimento através da educação e do papel da educação de construir novas relações internacionais. Muito obrigado.
Well, it's up to me to end the day, I imagine. It was a really stimulating day for me, and I expect that it also was for you. I think my brain is still with lots of new ideas and new challenges, and so I will have some days to put ideas together. I particularly enjoyed the idea of the conflict in a positive way. So I think I am very conflicted right now, and I hope I change, because that's the idea of this notion of conflict. There were some words that keep popping in my head, and they were recurrent over the day. One, of course, of cooperation that started in the morning and went through all the day. The idea of synergies, and I think that we can together make lots of important decisions. The emergencies, small emergencies, large emergencies, it doesn't need to be a big thing. It can start with, as our colleague said, with $20, and then it expands. So we don't have to stay quiet and can do nothing. No, we can do. It's just wanting to do and starting something. And also expectations, was a word that I heard a lot today, and of course we all go with some expectations. Some of them are good, some of them we have to be careful about them, I think, because we have to be aware of the other person's expectations, be the other, as we said in our panel. And
the last thing I don't think we talked about, but I heard some time ago, and I really enjoyed the idea of compromise, that is a promise with the others. And so I think we can live here today with this idea of promising to each other to continue this path and to develop this area further and further. Before I end, I just wanted to thank you, all of you, for coming to this seminar. It was really a pleasure and to have these lively discussions with all of you. I want to thank again the INEE, especially Dean Crooks, for their generosity in keeping another day here, because they are here from Monday, so they are pretty much exhausted, I imagine, but it was very interesting, and thank you for this opportunity of sharing your experience and your knowledge. Thank you, the Commission, the organizing committee of this seminar, especially the Resource Center for Cooperation and Development, and especially Julia Sands, of course, because without him this wouldn't be possible. And also the staff in the Institute. Here we have only Teresa Costa, but I know that some staff of the Institute are working. All the volunteers that were here from Monday also, and so there are still some of them here, volunteers for the work. And I hope I won't forget anyone who contributed to it, so it was really a pleasure for me and for the Institute to have you all here, and I hope we can have another meetings and be together in projects or continue keeping in touch. So thank you very much all.
So we've come to the end. This is not the end. As we like to say, once you join INEE, you can never leave. There is some coffee. Is that correct, Andrea? And so there's some coffee and little lovely cakes back over there. So please enjoy, and you can extend your goodbye. Thank you so much.